Okay, this is part 8 and the final part of time in for schools and integration with PBIS. In this one, Dr. Randall will go over the pyramid model, which is the model of adverse childhood studies. Really cool, shows you the different factors and where they stand in adverse conditions for kids. She'll talk about the ecology of health template and then procedural memories and how those affect your classroom. And actually, who are these kids in time in, and also the time in, the backdrop of culture. And then finally, she'll talk about cultural change. I hope you enjoyed the series. And of course, there are slides will follow at the end of this, plus a message about contact information as well. Thank you.
This is the model of the adverse childhood experiences, of why they go to the early death. Okay, so this was from the study. Adverse things happen to them, it disrupts their neurodevelopment, then they have problems in school and in their community, they adopt high-risk behaviors for health and otherwise, they have disease, disability, and social problems, and early death. Now, I'll be honest with you, you are in a high-risk community. I think you already know that, right? Because a lot of my referrals of the really high-risk kids come from this area, okay? So we already know that. So when I go and I talk around the country, I say about a third of kids live in homes where substances are a problem or there's issues related to them. Those are general population things. You're over at least 50 or 60% here, okay? So when you think about your classroom, you are dealing with some of the highest risk children in the country. And you are dedicated to getting them off of this triangle. That's why you're doing what you're doing. That's why time in is important. Because the only way to get them off is to provide new experiences that can deal with these. So we're going to go back. Remember I said a kid comes in, you try to have that good routine in your classroom, whatever, and they want chaos. Why do they want that chaos? So, some of you I've talked about before, Bruce Perry's work, some of you have read his work, some of you may want to read his work because he's one of the top trauma psychiatrists in the country who really talks about patterning in the brain. So what he says is, if you're going to learn, right, isn't memory one of the key things that you want in education, right? You want your kids to have good memory. You want them to learn, okay? It happens by, what do you do in school? Why do I do, the kids say, why do I have to do 30? I can just do 1. Right? Repetition. It's your key instructional thing because we know that by repetition you are setting down patterns in the brain that help that learning to occur. So if I do it repetitively, then later on I'll remember it. If I do 1 problem instead of 30, I haven't done enough repetitions to lay down that pathway in my brain. Right? So you're saying, nope, sorry, you got to do it repetitively to lay it down in the right place. Okay? Otherwise, you lay it down once, and it could be stored in the English file instead of a math file, or whatever. I mean, it's not something ingrained in you. So, patterns of experience matter. I'm going to talk about procedural memory in a minute. He talks about them as terms of templates in your brain. You have patterns of way to respond because you've had repetitive experiences. You want the kids by the end of the term in your class to have had enough pattern experiences that they can just recall and or recognize exactly the materials that you need them to learn. Okay? These templates can become so deeply ingrained that our brain actually habituates to them. Okay? Now, if somebody says 1 + 1, I don't have to do a math calculation. It's an automatic response, right? Or, it's like things that you just become a part that don't require thinking. So, in his book, he talks about kids with trauma. If the pattern at home was, the only way I'm safe is if it's chaotic, because if it gets quiet, I could get hit or whatever, or I don't know if the adult focuses on me, what that could mean in terms of my safety, so I have to do a distraction, or I need the adult to focus on me, so I create distraction because my inner being feels empty and I need that filled. Whatever those templates are, they replay in your classroom. Okay? So, you have these patterns going on that I function best in chaos. I come to your classroom in order to function. I'm creating chaos. Those are patterned experiences, but remember they come from those other situations. So if we look at that, so how does it affect your classroom? I told you before about Tolden. He has 3 types of memory: episodic and episode. Have you ever been somewhere? Did you do something? Recognition, recall. Have you been to Pinyon Mesa? Yep, I know where it is now. I still don't know how to get in the door, but I know how to get in there. So I can drive here, it's just getting in. And then, okay, so then you have semantic memory, okay? Associations, feeling. Yeah, I know people, I really like them. We have a spirit of really wanting to do something on behalf of children together. So there's a feeling associated. Oh, that smell reminds me of my grandma's kitchen, or, you know, so there's a feeling associated to your memory, okay? Those are your awareness. That's what you're dealing with a lot in education. You're trying to get them to recognize, recall. But what you're trying to lay down, then, is things that become just a part of, without thinking, I know the answer. Or without thinking, I can respond. Those are procedural memories. Those are the templates that Bruce Perry's talking about. Those templates then get laid down very early on in life. Most of them, by the time you're 3, you have these patterns of how you think about yourself and other. Okay? So unless you're teaching a kid right now how to tie a shoe, if I try to ask you, you can tie a shoe, you can do a lecture while you tie your shoe. But to tell me how to tie a shoe requires going from automatic thought into awareness. Okay? This is key because when you're changing a behavior in the classroom, you are changing a template. And what did I just say about procedural memory? Is it in your awareness or out of your awareness?
Out.
Out. So when you're asking a kid to change a behavior, a lot of that time, that behavior is out of their awareness. The role you have is pulling it into awareness and putting it in a different pattern. So sometimes you're going to try to change behavior by focusing on that, but hopefully more of the time is you're going to lay down new pathways, better pathways. But the only way to lay down better pathways of how to behave in classrooms is by consistency, routine, and nurturing. Okay, back to where we started. So let's say in your class, there's a consistent routine, and there's a pattern, and the expectations of the classroom match the expectations of the school, and I'm there. But let's say over here, I'm in your class, and it's completely different, and we really don't go by that, and, you know, we do things a little bit different. You know, there might be different scenarios going on. I don't know what they all are. Will you lay down new patterns? Likely not. If a kid's pretty resilient and the other patterns aren't so ingrained that it's a part of automatic function, maybe. But for your kids who are not surviving or not doing well, it's usually because they require those patterns to be everywhere, by everyone. So the passion that I have about doing what I do is that I be a part of a chain, a part of a link in a chain that's doing the same thing on behalf of kids. And by encouraging and imploring to my colleagues to say, please do that same chain, that this might be the first time in a kid's life he's ever had an interaction with an adult who cares about them and who says, I'm happy you're here, let's get to work, does more about keeping the room safe, does a lot about keeping the situation that they know when they come in, this is what's expected, you get this out, you do this, you do all of that, and that routine becomes a part of their being. Now, think about your own behavior changes, your patterns. Are they easy? Has anybody ever tried to change? Go to the next slide. But I want you to see how, for me, time in makes a key difference in terms of the education that child will get and then how to change that trajectory. So Adam is 3 years old. He has been asked not to come back to preschool because you can't say expelled. Okay. He has a severe, well, you can if they don't like me say that. He has a severe language delay. He has no apparent attachment to caregivers. He hides under his desk in preschool. He won't play with the other children. He's aggressive when he's urged to interact. He could be 15, right? Or 10. His arms flap and fail when he's dysregulated, and he's obsessed with cars and trucks. So I get the referral. What do you think the referral was for? Excellent. Autism. All right? Now, if I was just filling out my forms and looking at numbers, what would I diagnose this kid? Autistic. But if I'm going to spend time in and learn about this kid, which I did, and for some reason that preschool did not, or didn't understand it when they did, let's go to the next slide. Adam's ACE score is 8. He lived in a drug-endangered environment with his bio parents up until 7 months prior. He was severely neglected and starved. He had physical and emotional abuse. His parents were involved in illegal drug activity. His father is currently incarcerated for trying to kill his mother. He had severe domestic violence, and there's mental illness in the home. Is he autistic? No. And when I asked and started finding out what cars he's obsessed with, rescue vehicles. But had I gone with just what the presenting issue was, chewing gum in the classroom, being tardy, disrupting your class, had I gone with the behaviors that presented, I would have diagnosed this child autistic, and he would have been given likely the one treatment that's required is ABA. Not that I'm all totally against ABA, it has its place, but it isn't the place for this kid. So I would have done wrong to this child. And so I take that upon myself when I do wrong on behalf of a child, because I don't take the time in to learn about who this kid in front of me is. Okay? That's how I take it. Instead, this child got trauma therapy, working on attachment, and there's a lot of things. I'll have to tell you, this kid is thriving right now, and he is doing excellent in school. There was a lot of things put in place behind that. Was he going to function the next day just because I knew? Was he going to function the next day in the classroom? No. But going to the school, talking about his needs, getting him support, getting speech and language, getting all those things in place, we've changed that trajectory of this kid around. Okay? Yeah, you have many more years when they get to you about what those templates and how ingrained they are, which means you need a lot more patterned experiences to change those. But you're right, and some of those kids are not in homes where they're going to learn. They're going to continue in these homes for those. So they're coming to you with an ACE score of 8, but 8 years, 10 years, 12 years of experience of that ACE score of 8. Okay? But it doesn't mean that we still can't change their trajectory. It doesn't mean that working together we can't do pattern experience. But it does mean that some of the kids will rise to the top of needing potentially more help than what you're going to do alone in the classroom. It doesn't mean that we can't strategize ways to keep them in the classroom as much as possible, but there might be more resources necessary for those kids.
Okay, that leads us to my question. I've been thinking about what you were saying, and a kid, you said if they're raised in chaos, they're going to try to maintain, not all of them, but some of them are going to try to maintain that atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come and you meet that with your own patterns, right, are they going to, some of them are still going to resist. They're not going to go along with that because it rocks their world.
Until the brain can experience that in a healthy way. So if you're the only one doing it, it's going to take you a really long time. But my point is if we're all doing it, and it might be for a certain kid that pattern experience might need talking about in a team meeting so that all the teachers know exactly what that pattern might need to be about, okay? But once that brain knows it, so for example, in that interaction, because you see them every day for quite a long period of time in terms of duration over time, a year or a couple of years or whatever it is, I don't know how the patterns work. So you have the ability to be a part of that routine for that hour. I know that sometimes in my interaction, and I'll see them maybe once for 2 hours, I can tell that that brain has never had a synchronicity in terms of response of give and take. I didn't lay it down in a procedural memory, but now that brain can find it again. That brain can find and know, oh, that's when I was able to look back, speak back, and start developing a relationship. That brain never experienced it before, but it will recognize it again. And if I do that, and then you do that, and you do that, and you do that, it'll start feeling like that is an experience the brain will want. Okay? But it does require time for that to happen. Now, some kids, the resistance will be more limited because they'll feel comfort in it sooner than others. Okay? Some kids will feel comfort in that routine sooner than others. I've had kids placed pretty quickly and they find, whereas others will still, depends on the amount of trauma or the kinds of things happening in their life. The other thing that you're fighting is that you might have the pattern here, but at home they don't. So separating those out will, in terms of the child being able to understand that. So some of the messaging would be also, at school, this is how we're expected to be, and we need you to learn that, and that's important for you, and it's, you know. Top of our culture of time in, I want to get to the last slide, but these are things we talked about before. Relationships, number one. That's what we talked about. Love, relationships, number one. Communication, be clear on your expectations and your rules. Know how to engage and allow disengagement when appropriate. We've talked about that. Do less stop doing, do more start doing. For some kids whose procedural memories don't even know what they're doing wrong, you have to add the stop doing. For other kids, it's just enough to say, this is what I want. Don't take it personal. Give students a way out. Don't make them so far in the demerit hole in your classroom or your school that they have no way out and they're hopeless. Because those are the ones who are like, I don't care. All right? And watch your power battles. Make it about the rules and what's great and important for their learning and not about you. And I want, forget that one, go to the last one. Well, we talked about that already. 2 points. The patterns, make sure you know it's patterns that are going to sit down new procedural memory. And children are going to learn from their experience with you. But okay. This is my challenge to us now. Okay? And this is what some of the comments I think you brought up already before. But in order for this to move forward, the individual elements from each of you is going to be one, making a conscious decision to integrate time in as your state of being. Okay? Having a game plan so that when you get in the classroom, it isn't all of a sudden, oh my gosh, what do I do with this kid? Think about what are some of the scenarios that scare you in the classroom or that are difficult for you. Let's talk about strategies. Let's talk about skill sets that you might need. And know that you don't have to be an island. There may be more experienced teachers or teachers who have good strategies in the classroom. Use them. Use them. Use each other. The other one that you already mentioned is being a student. That's what I call being a student of your own behavior. Each of us have our own procedural memories, and we are triggered. Okay? We get our own triggers. So be a student of your own behavior, your own stuff that might be taking some of those things. And this is the creative chef thing. You have to do this, have an experimental attitude. You've got to be creative. consulted on a kid. He was a runaway risk. He was in middle school, and he was always trying to run away from school. Always trying to get out of school, running away, getting in trouble, whatever. But he liked to run. So they made him the track athlete for the school. And they had him come to school early every day to run the track because they wanted him to win prizes for the school or whatever. But really what they were doing, yes, he did, and that was great, and it gave him purposefulness, right, and gave him time in with people. But he was so worn out from practicing so much at the beginning of the day, he wasn't running away the rest. But you know what I mean? Be thinking outside of the box, get input from each other, and look at the students' needs and how to provide time in that's appropriate to them. Either in the classroom, with external resources, with support through going through the dean, or whatever it might be. What's appropriate to the students at that time, also looking at the educational needs of your classroom. So it's not specific recipes, but I wanted to really re-empower you in terms of the impact and the change you can do in kids' trajectories, and also by adopting that culture, the culture of your school as well. Okay?
Very inspiring. Thank you, Dr. Randall.
Okay, and if you would like more information on this, you can go to Dr. Randall's website at timeindrkiti.com. That's timeindrkiti.com. Or you can just comment here on the video at the YouTube. I'll get your comment, and if you would like any information, I'd be glad to pass that on. Hope you've enjoyed it.